As Dr. Jehan said, my name is Faizan Ali, Assistant Professor, College of Hospitality and Tourism Technology, USFSM. This is always so long to pronounce. And we decided to do something like this. So most of us know how to publish, right? And a lot of us have actually published, but a lot of us do not know how to publish successfully. Now, successfully is in red color, so it's the dangerous part, right? Red color represents danger, right? So when I say danger, what do I mean by this? So many of us publish papers, and then down the road, which recently happened with a very famous professor in Cornell University, published so many papers in food psychology, food consumption, and stuff like this, and the entire research area is based on his research, right? So people cite his work and build up on that. But recently it was found that research had some problems. And when the publisher and the newspaper people, they tried to reach out to this researcher asking for data, he refused to give them data, and the data which was provided had fatal problems. So now his 18 or 13, I'm not sure, 13 or 18 of his papers are retracted, which is fine, right? So there's a problem, papers are retracted. Now the question is, what happens to that entire body of knowledge that is built on his studies, right? So that's why it's so important to understand how do we publish successfully, right? How do we publish where it goes with us till the end? We don't get into problems later on. That's one thing. Another thing is, many times people publish papers. I have met people in the US, they have studied in different countries, published multiple papers, but when they go into other countries, those papers are not counted towards their promotion or towards their tenure or nothing. People just don't consider those papers. Now, obviously, whoever is doing this thing, they are putting effort, right? They are putting effort to publish papers, but later on those papers are not considered, which is again a problem. So what we need to do is we need to understand how do we deal with these type of situations, okay? And that's why I put it in red, successfully. So along the way when I'm talking, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and ask the question, okay, so that we can answer it right at that time. We don't want to do it in the end. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Selecting the right journal. The first thing, wherever you are publishing, which journal is considered the right journal, so we'll talk about that. Thinking ahead during research. So for anything that you do, well, even when in the morning you wake up and you go to your office, you think about what are you going to do in your office, right? Or what are you going to wear, or what are you going to eat for your breakfast? It's so simple. But when it comes to research papers where you spend 6 months, 8 months, I've seen a lot of people who do not really think about it in advance. They just go along the way and start thinking while they are doing things, right? So that's very important. We'll talk about why is it important to think ahead during your research. Understanding the publication process. Now, a lot of us are authors, right? So we look at publication process from our perspective. But since last couple of years, as my role into editorial positions, I look at the publication process from another perspective, right? It's across the table. So it's very important to convey this, how the publication process works from perspective of publishers, so that authors know what to expect during that entire process. Because if you do not know as authors, it builds up a lot of frustration, okay? And sometimes that frustrations push people to do something that they are not supposed to do, okay? The red successful thing. All right, so we'll talk about that. What makes a good research paper? So we all do research papers, but what is it that makes your research paper a good research paper? Common errors and avoiding them. So there are a lot of common errors people make no matter what is your discipline, whether you're working in marketing, psychology, organizational behavior, no matter what. But there are certain errors that are common across different disciplines. So we'll talk about that. How to create a perfect pitch. So do you guys know about elevator pitch? Where you go into an elevator, you have a couple of seconds and you have to pitch the idea. Research paper is pretty much like that, okay? I read some stuff. Sometimes when I get papers to review, the moment I read the first 2 paragraphs, I realize what type of paper that is. So basically it's about how do you create that pitch, okay? So we'll talk about all these things. We have almost 1 hour and 45 minutes, so some of the sections I'm going to cruise through faster, some of the sections I'm going to spend more time so that it's clear, okay? Alright, so my background, I'm not going to go into this. Dr. Jehan said a lot, and if I repeat it, it just sounds a little bit self-praise. Okay, so I'm not going to do that. So all these things, just a couple of things about the editorial position. So the two journals that I'm very proud of being on their editorial boards as coordinating editor and assistant editor, these are the top two journals in our field in hospitality, so number one and number two. So whatever I'm going to talk today is coming from that experience working with these top tier journals. So it's going to be very beneficial for most of you. All right, so now my experience with research, how does this start? Okay, how does my interest in research started? What do I see? But if you look, there's a static right on the top. So when I talk now, when I'm telling you some stuff, please don't mind it, okay? Because I see some of you are from Malaysia, some of you are from Indonesia, from Asian countries. So whatever I say, there's a small thing, and since I'm from marketing, I put it very small so you don't see it, but it just says that everyone is not the same, okay? So these are my experiences I'm going to share with you. Some of you might really agree to these things because I know what happens in Asian countries. So my PhD was from UTM, International Business School. I was there for almost 3 years. My PhD finished in 2.5 years, but graduation and all that, 2.5 years, 3 years. I dealt with a lot of people, with professors, assistant professors, associate professors, many PhD students, master students, right? So there was a lot of interaction with people from that place. Then I'm a member of doctorate support group. Now, anybody who knows about this group? Yes or no? Mustafa, you know? So doctorate support group is a group on Facebook that has more than 65,000 members. It's amongst the biggest groups on Facebook, among the top 10, I guess. And they even invited the moderators and the owners of the group to talk about how do they deal with the community issues and stuff. So this group is specifically for researchers. I mean, it's for doctorate support group, but there are a lot of professors, a lot of faculty members who are part of this group. People share their experiences, people talk about different things, different hurdles and stuff like this. Also publication tips and tricks, statistics, and a lot of things related to research, specific to research. So I'm very active on this group for the last 5-6 years, right? And I see how people share different things and stuff like this. Then I also worked at Taylor's University in Malaysia for a year as a research associate, so I was involved in different research projects. So what I'm trying to say is that I have a lot of interaction with researchers, research people in Asian countries, in Asian contexts, right? And now I'm supervising students, PhD and master students from Pakistan, China, Malaysia, and I was just told in Vietnam a couple of students to examine them externally. So all this type of stuff. In fact, when I was coming here, we had almost 35 hours of flight from the US till here. So I actually finished one PhD dissertation examining the entire thing throughout the flight. It was really, really tiring. Imagine you are flying and also reading an entire PhD dissertation. So again, when I read that dissertation, it also reinforced my idea of the problems with the system. So what do I see based on all this, okay? So here is one picture which I took from this doctorate support group, okay? So it simply shows a rooster registration, and then by the time convocation happens, that become like this, okay? It's just randomly I pick it up. In fact, just now I sent to you, right? So here's another picture. Now, it's fun, right? It's funny, right? Okay. Now imagine, okay, let's say, all right. So tell me, somebody, do you guys have any ideal organization that you want to work for? Anybody, any ideal organization that you want to work for? Anyone?
United Nations.
You want to work for United Nations, right? It's very prestigious, very big and all that, okay? Now imagine you go to United Nations or you are trying to get information, and the director or somebody from really top level, right, with a lot of experience comes and tells you, this is going to happen with you when you work at United Nations. What will happen to your motivation? Or if they tell you this is what's going to happen to you if you work for United Nations, what would be your mindset? Like you are so inspired to work at United Nations, you are really motivated, but all of a sudden somebody who has been working there, who has gone through this, is telling you something like this, even if it's fun, is it going to demotivate you? Yes? Is it going to create some sort of like, should I really work there? right? This is the biggest problem with the system, with PhD, with research, okay? I talk to so many people, like these two girls, these are undergraduate and one students. I simply ask them, what do you want to do? They said, master's is okay, PhD, I don't know, maybe we'll see. I have, in US, I have a master's student, she's about to finish. She is sitting across the table, about to finish master's. I asked her, what's your plan? She said, well, I probably will work somewhere, you know, blah, blah. I said, how about PhD? She said, well, I want a real job. And she's telling it to my face, like, I'm a PhD, okay? And I'm asking her, do you want to do a PhD? She said, well, no, I want a real job. So I said, what do you think I'm doing here? Is it not a job? So basically, with all these things, what we do is we create the entire system pretty much like this, okay? So imagine you are a person, you want to do something, and your final goal is to get a paper accepted in a journal or get your PhD done or whatever. After reading all these posts, all this demotivation, this is what happens, right? Normally, tell me, how many of you have experienced this? When you talk to somebody about PhD or research, and people would say, it's so difficult, oh, it's so much work, blah, blah, blah. Happens, right? It happens to all of us. So, what I think is, the end result becomes pretty much this. People start hating it. People start hating research papers, right? Okay, Jihan just said I have 70 publications. Again, I don't want to self-praise myself. 70 publications in 5 years is pretty impressive, right? Yes. But I'm still a human being. I mean, he was joking. It's not real that I wake up and I have papers. Okay, we do a lot of work, right? But that's self-motivation. So whatever I hear, I just take it out. Or at least I talk to people who are positive around myself to just keep myself positive, right? Now, we understand that sometimes things are difficult, right? This young lady, Grace, she is about to finish her PhD. That day we were eating and I talked to her for more than an hour, right? About her research. And she asked me questions and I was explaining to her. In fact, even today during the session, she came to me and asked me some question and I told her a lot of good things, right? Did I tell you, don't do it, it's bad, blah, blah, blah. So, remember that research is where what I'm doing when I don't know what I'm doing. This is the basic definition of research, right? Because you feel lost, right? Research is feeling lost. Because if you're not lost, there's no research, right? You research, you dig things, you dig information. So this is a basic feeling which people feel when they are doing research. But when you are doing this, it's completely fine to ask for help. Okay? Well, because we all are not perfect. Some of us are good at certain things, but we are not good at certain other things. So it's completely fine to ask for help, right? But what happens is when people ask for help is, sometimes they forget that they are asking for help. Sometimes what we feel is, even if we are asking for help, we feel that, okay, the person who is giving me help is actually bound to give me all the things. And I'll give you an example. So I told you I'm active on that group, right? Yes? Doctorate research support group. So sometimes there's a question like this. Can you help me find a research topic? Okay. So, wow. Now imagine I woke up in the morning, I'm just scrolling through my phone and can you help me find a research topic? Wow. So just imagine, okay? So that's not help, that's sort of spoon feeding, right? So you still have to do all this stuff, right? What I showed you is you still have to go through all this. Once you are not sure how to get out of this, then you ask for help. You can't just come in the morning and ask people like, can you help me? Okay? One day and again, funny things happen in our field, okay? Sometimes people ask questions, I help, okay? Question like, okay, what do you think about the sampling type? What do you think about my questionnaire? It's okay, right? But sometimes when things like this happen, like, can you help me with research topic? I don't want to be rude, so I don't answer. And then I get a lot of messages from the person like, oh, you are so rude. Oh, you are out of this world. You think your head is above the sky. Things like this, you know. So, look, I know some of you may think why I'm saying this, but these are the realities, okay? And it's good to start talking about these things because most of you are young researchers. Avoid doing these things because you never know what type of person you will come across. I just talked about this Grace. She didn't know me. Okay, that day we were talking, and obviously when I go to a restaurant, I don't wear my name badge, right? I don't wear this name badge, so she didn't know my name. I started talking to her about her PhD dissertation or thesis. She told me about her work, which is pretty much similar to my own PhD dissertation. So I told her, like, it's similar to my PhD dissertation. And then we talked, and then she realized that my name is Faizan Ali, and then she was very happy because she said, I cited a lot of your papers. Okay, fine, this is very good. This is an example of you never know who do you come across. Sometimes you may really misbehave with a person on Facebook thinking that you might not come across these people again. But then you realize that these people are the people who are going to come across you a lot, right? So just make sure that when you don't know what to do, it's completely fine to ask for help, but you should be aware of what type of help you are asking, okay? All right, so what is research? Now, I think pretty much all of you are researchers, so just give me a brief idea. What do you think research is? Searching for information. Anybody else somewhere in the back?
Seeking knowledge.
Seeking knowledge. What else?
Solve problems.
Solve problems. Anybody else there, this side?
SME perform.
Oh, performance. Okay. All right. Anybody in the back? Getting question answers. So do you see there's a similar trend? Seeking information, solving problems, answering the questions, knowing the performance. All these are similar things, right? What it simply means is that knowing the unknown, right? But when we say unknown, there is some ultimate unknown. If there's ultimate unknown, you can't know it, right? But when we say knowing the unknown, it means that that unknown is somewhere there, you need to know it. So research doesn't mean searching. It means there's something there, you have to research it. You really need to re-find it, right? So remember that research ideas come based on reading. You don't wake up one morning and you think something come to my head and that's my research idea. A lot of people do this, okay? Like recently somebody told me something about some idea and I asked that person like, how do you know about this? And that person said, I just know it. I said, how do you just know it? Like, how do you just know something? You have to read it somewhere, you have to listen it from somewhere or something, right? So whenever that happens, you have to say it. Like, I've heard it from here, I've read it here, or I've seen it here. That's how I know it, okay? Now, how many of you know cats? Cats? Do you guys like cats?
Yes.
Why?
Cute.
Cute? What do they do that is cute?
They listen.
Oh, your cat listens to you?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Okay. What makes cats cute? Anybody? Okay, just imagine this, okay? Imagine this room is empty and I leave a small cat here. What would that cat do?
Follow me.
Huh?
Follow me.
No. Nobody is here. Empty room. I just leave that cat here. What will that cat do? Oh, your cat is boring then. I think the cat would go here and there, try to see what is there, and try to play with their hands and jump here and there and see what's happening and scratch the seat or whatever, right? It just seems the cat is so crazy, right? But there's one very good characteristic that is associated with cats, and that's curiosity. Have you heard of this? Cats are curious, right? Yes or no? Cats are curious. But some cats are not curious and they sleep all the time, like your cat. But the normal cats are curious, right? They run here and there. Like, researchers are like cats, okay? This is,
You know what? Curiosity kills the cat.
yes, yes. So for researchers, all curiosity kills the researchers. Okay? So there's a time where you have to stop your curiosity and try to find answers for that, right? You can't just keep curious about your research and change your methods and change your research questions. This is something I really like about research. The Zoranide cluster, the definition for research, this is formalized curiosity. So when you're doing research, I don't know about you guys, but I feel very excited. Sometimes I see something new, I just feel so excited. I try to search more about that thing. Then I go to another publisher's website, find some more stuff about it. It just makes me feel happy. I try to get answers for things, right? So research is a formalized curiosity. Why we are saying formalized is because it's scientific research you are talking about. So you still have to follow a process. But curiosity is the key. You have to be curious about it. Poking and prying. You know what is poking? Yes? Yeah. Imagine this, okay? I go somewhere and I do this to somebody. What would that person do? Angry? I go again and I do like this. What will happen? Third time.
What is wrong with you?
Why you are saying things about him? That's poking, right? Researchers need to poke things, okay? You need to poke. But your poking should be with a purpose. You just don't poke anything you want. You need to poke with a purpose, right? So let's say Mustafa in the morning talked about PLS. Now, some of you might be excited about PLS, right? So your purpose is, okay, let me see what's the literature about PLS in the last 5 years. So that's your purpose. Now you start poking the literature in the last 5 years about PLS. Poking means what? Okay, you poke. If it reacts to you, which means if it gives you something exciting, you are working with it. If it doesn't do anything, you just leave it, go to another one. Okay? So that's what it means. My favorite definition of research. Alright, where do we start research now? This is very interesting. So some of you said research is answering the questions, solving the problem, performance, and a lot of stuff. Where does the research start? You do research, right? Where does your research start?
From the limitation from the previous research.
Wow, limitation from the previous research. Good. So you start reading about it, right? And then you directly go to the limitation section.
That's the favorite thing.
That's a favorite thing. Good. Okay, for me, good research starts with good research topic. You need to have a topic because limitations, you just don't go and download 50 normal random papers and read the limitations, right? You have to have a topic and then you find papers related to that topic and read the limitations. So you have to have a topic. You know, the topic needs to be there. At least broader topic, right? So your good research always starts with a good research topic. Good research topic comes from a good knowledge of the literature, right? Because remember we talked about is knowing the unknown means the things exist, you just need to find them, right? How do you find them? By having good knowledge of the literature. You need to look into the literature, right? Literature review, we talk about it, yes? You need to find the literature. Where does the good knowledge of literature come from? A lot of reading. Okay, a lot of reading. Now what do we mean by a lot of reading? So recently somebody on that Facebook group asked a question and that student said, I finished my PhD thesis, now I am doing my references. What is a good number of references for PhD thesis? Okay, now this is so interesting, right? You finish your PhD thesis and now you're asking people how many references should I put in the end of my thesis? Wow, so funny, right? What do you think, how many references should we put in there?
Maybe 200.
200, 300. You said a lot.
Mine is more.
Wow. Anybody there? How many references should we put in the end of the PhD thesis?
Depend on the area and depend on your
Yes.
copy.
It depends on your area. How about if you are doing something that nobody has done before? Where do you bring 200 research references about it? Like, or 300, right? And then I've seen people who, they have 100 pages of dissertation and 200 pages of references. This, okay, and then sometimes you have to think about it realistically, okay? I finished my PhD in 2.5 years, okay? 2.5 years, and now I have, let's say, 800 references in the end of my, or 1,000 in the end of my dissertation. You must have seen dissertations with 1,000 references, right? 1,000 references in 2.5 years mean that every year I should have read somewhere around 330 to 335 papers, right? Okay, every year 330 means that every month I should have read somewhere around 30 to 35 papers. Can we read that much? Now imagine this is only reading. We also have to write the PhD, right? We also have to go out with family, with friends. We also have to sleep, right? Also have to eat, right? We also have to do a lot of things. We also have to do weddings and birthday parties and all that stuff. How is it possible that somebody can read 30 papers a month and also working? A lot of us are working as well when we are doing PhD, right? Is it possible?
Yeah.
Impossible.
Wow. You show me that person.
You're the one. Give yourself an example.
I don't have 1,000 references. I have like 200 something.
Well,
Okay.
actually, I think it's about scanning and stealing.
Yes, but the thing is, look, here is what normally happens, okay? Whenever we are sitting in the classroom environment or workshops, we always think about the optimistic or the perfect situation, right? Perfectly, when we think about it, yes, skimming and all that works. But when you really work, do you do that? No? Tell me honestly, like the references you put in the end of your paper, do you really read everything you are putting in the end?
No, no.
We
So it's the
shouldn't-
reason that maybe somebody put 200 or 300. So no need to read.
So basically what I'm trying to say is you need to read, okay? Whatever you are putting, you need to read. And sometimes because you don't read, things can get really crazy, and especially with statistics. Sometimes people pick up a paper about statistics, they just find one sentence, like there's a full sentence which says, okay, and in the morning even Mustafa said that, if your loadings are between 0.5 and 0.7, it's okay if your internal consistency is okay, right? So sometimes people just take the first part, loading between 0.5 and 0.7 is okay. Leave the other part. And then cite Mustafa's paper. Now somebody read this paper, cite this paper without looking at the original paper. So it builds up on the wrong justifications, right? And it creates a lot of problem. So good knowledge comes from with a lot of reading. So when you say you have read something, you should really read that thing, okay? All right.
Can we depend on the meta-analysis papers?
Yes, a very, very good thing to do. Okay? Meta-analysis papers are where they do an entire paper on a certain topic. Okay, so you have a certain topic, you do an entire paper on that. Like me and Dr. Mustafa, we recently did a paper on usage of PLS in hospitality research. So we look at all the papers in hospitality that have used PLS. And then we take out different things and put it into one paper. So now, if you don't have time to read 80 papers, you just go and read that meta-analysis paper which summarizes everything, right? But again, remember, when you read meta-analysis, it should come from a very good journal. Don't pick up a meta-analysis that has been published in a journal that charges you $400 to publish. Okay, so there are still some things you need to consider. Now reading, when we talk about reading, what do we normally read for literature? Journal articles, right? We normally read journal articles, but it's not right. You know, sometimes when you are reading journal articles, that it's not enough. That's not something you really want to do. There are a lot of other things you need to read for your research, okay? Things like industry magazines. You also need to read industry magazines. How many of you were in the think tank that we had yesterday? You guys were there, right? Jihan shared a lot of articles about things that's going to happen in 15 years, 20 years later, right? Things like that. Do you normally see those type of things in research papers?
Usually not.
Usually not. So you have to read the industry articles to understand the trends in the industry or what's going to happen, because your research needs to inform people about what's going to happen, not what's already happened. Like if you tell somebody now wheel is round, it doesn't make any sense. People already know it, right? You have to read the industry magazines, good magazines, to see what's going on in the industry. Industry shows. Malaysia is very famous for this. And in fact, a lot of Asian countries are really getting good on business tourism. So you have a lot of industry shows. People come to those places, right? Recently, I went to FRLA show, which is Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. People from all over the country, US, they came to Florida to show what type of products they provide for hospitality and tourism, right? In fact, Jihan told me he went to one show where he saw that Philips, the Philips company, came with a new type of paint on the wall that changes colors based on your mood. So the paint has electromagnetic things. So if, let's say, you go to a hotel, the lady on the counter say, okay, what's your favorite color? And what's your favorite color? Blue. You go to your room and your room is blue. And then you go back and say, like, why is my room blue? And the lady asks you, okay, what do you want? I just want yellow. And you go back, it's yellow. right? How do you know this? From industry show. So
That's right.
now, let's say, okay, this is industry show. I want to do a research on this. So what I do is I create a scenario, ask you, just what I just said to you, right? I create this scenario and I ask you a few questions. What do you feel? Would you go to that hotel? Would you feel happy to go to that hotel? Would you pay more? Blah, 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 right? So my research comes from industry shows. So reading involves this. Social media. Probably last year, there was an incident in the US where I think there was a guy from Vietnam who was dragged out of the plane. You guys watched that one on social media? Happened, right, on social media. And it becomes so famous on social media that people have started looking into the misbehavior in the aircraft. Now that was not a research topic, but since it happened on social media, it becomes so famous and people started doing research on it. So social media can also inform your research. Blogs, podcasts, and then you talk to people, talk to industry executives, interview them, just talk to them, okay? UITM recently did something very interesting, and I really like that idea. And I want to share this because I like it a lot. So what they do is that they are actually attaching their young faculty with the CEOs of different companies in Malaysia for 1 year. So the young faculty works with the CEO for 1 year. Now imagine how much experience, how much knowledge that faculty is gaining from the industry, and how better their research would be after that 1 year, right? So that's all what you need to do in order to read. Not only research papers, not only research articles, but a lot of other things, okay? Now, when we talk about this, the next question is, which is the right journal for me? Okay, we are all in different fields. And why do we ask this question? Okay, let's say I come here and I ask all of you a question. There is a guy who was a little bit earlier here. He has a little bit big belly. He's very funny and he talks to a lot of people, right? He's Turkish. Do you know who he is? Jihan. It's easy to know, right? It's Jihan. Okay. But imagine this. I come here, I say, yesterday I was coming on the road, somebody was on the scooter, they kicked me and ran away. Can you guess who that person is? Why?
Not enough.
Not enough information. Okay, I give you information. The scooter was green color. The person is wearing green helmet. He is a short guy with no beard. Then? Can be anyone because there are too many people, right? So if we had 20 journals, easy to find the right journal. But this is what happens. December 2017, you know Elsewhere, publisher, Elsewhere? 2,500 journals. Taylor and Francis, 2,100 journals. Wiley, 1,500 journals. Sage, 1,000 journals. Emerald, over 300 journals. How many journals are these? A lot, right? And now we are talking about just some very famous publishers. We are not talking about any ABC publishers. These are just very famous. There are so many more publishers, right? We are not talking about them. So imagine if I add all of those in it. How many journals do we have? It's really difficult to say how many journals we have in total, right? Too many. So after I had these numbers, I had to dig into some indexes because all these journals also go to indexes, right? So it's giving us a better idea of how many journals we have, like Google Scholar or SSCI or Scopus or stuff like this. So let's look at this. Web of Science, which is really good, it's elite, so they don't really take all the journals, has over 18,000 journals indexed in Web of Science. Scopus has 22,800 journals. Google Scholar do not say how many journals they have, but an estimate shows 150,000. And directly of open access journals, which always take the open access journals, have 9,000 journals. Imagine, you have all these journals, how do you find the right journal for you? Right? It's like people in Beijing. You go to Beijing, everywhere are people, how do you find the right person for you? Cannot. Right? So, let's look at, before I tell you how do you find your right journal, I want to show you something about open access. How many of you have heard of this word, open access publications? Yes? How many?
Yeah.
Open access, quite a few of you, right? What does it mean?
No fees.
What?
It doesn't
We
charge
must pay.
to
Readers
readers.
pay.
Yeah.
Yes. Readers do not have to pay anything to read the papers, right? Okay. I'm a reader, right? I read papers. So if there is a journal that does not charge me to read the papers, the journal has cost, right? Right? The journal still has cost. So if the reader is not paying, who is paying for it? Authors are paying for it. Is it right for authors to pay or not? Exactly, it depends. So every journal that is charging authors to pay is not wrong. Some journals have to ask authors to pay, like for example, sustainability. It's a very good journal. There are top researchers who publish there, who edit their special issues. A very good journal. They charge people because the cost is pretty high, right? But they say it clearly, and plus they go through a proper system to publish the papers, proper review process. Okay? I am not going to share the information of a paper. I did it as an experiment, but because we are live on Facebook, I don't want to get into trouble. But I did an experiment where I sent a paper to a journal that charged people to pay. Okay? Or that charged people to publish. The title of the paper was something related to consumer behavior. Okay? The abstract was also consumer behavior. The entire paper was something about HR. Just experiment. I'm going to publish it very soon though. The paper got accepted 3 days later. The first, oh, your paper is really good. Pay us this much so we can send it to review. The review come back. Amazing paper. One line. Next day paper is online. Wow. Imagine. This is so bad, right? What does it mean for the scientific inquiry? Okay? So when we talk about open access, just look at why people are moving towards open access. Obviously, one is the funding issues, right? Universities have limited resources. We have more researchers. We don't really have enough money to pay to the journals, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, look at how much money are publishers making, big publishers like Elsewhere. Elsewhere even got into trouble with the amount of money they charge the universities, right? But what do other people get who are actually building those journals? I am on editorial board of 7 journals. I don't get paid. Okay? I review last year I reviewed over 100 papers. Over 100 papers. Not a single penny. Do I spend time when I review papers? Definitely. Do I put effort in it? Of course. Sometimes when I review paper, I have to do a lot of research to review that paper because, I have to see if they are saying what they are saying is that true or not true. But I don't get anything out of it. Authors, even the authors, like many of you publish, Mustafa published 20 papers a year. But after a certain time, even if his university does not have access to that publisher, he can't access his own paper as author. Like as an author, really, I don't have access to my own papers. I wrote them. It's funny, right? So that's why people are moving towards open access. But since open access, the readers don't have to pay to read it. Just imagine how many citations increase with open access. Okay, so since I'm from business and management, so just look at this. So for business-related journals, the citation increase somewhere around 70%. If you publish with a publisher as opposed to open access journal, your citations increase by 70%. Management, it's close to 90%. Why? Because now you have more and more people reading that paper, right? Because a lot of, especially developing countries, don't have a lot of resources to access, right? So that's the thing. But remember that open access does not mean paid predatory journals, okay? So you must remember that all the open access journals are not predatory journals, but all the predatory journals are mainly open access. Okay? So whenever you are trying to find a journal and if it's open access, you really need to see if it's predatory journal or not. How do you know if a journal is predatory? You need to look at the type of papers they publish. You need to look at their editorial board. Remember, I as a scholar will never ever agree to be on editorial board of a predatory journal, a journal that does not have a proper policy of reviewing. So, if a lot of you know me as a scholar, I am not on editorial board of a journal. So, in your failure to see if the editorial board show you people like A, B, C who you do not know, whose paper you have never read, never published in that type of journals. Okay, so that's something I wanted to say. Now, how many of you know ISI? I want to publish ISI paper. Yes or no? Yes? Pretty difficult, right? Everybody needs to publish ISI to get promoted. ISI is already outdated. There's no more ISI, okay? Because another company bought ISI, which was whatever. Now it become Thomas Reuters. And I think when I made this presentation, now it's even not Thomas Reuters, it's
Clarivate
Analytics. So another company bought it, so it's different. But we have to see Thomas Reuters. Institutions have access to it. So when you want to find the good journal, this is one way to find it. You can go to Web of Science and see if that journal is indexed in Web of Science or not. This is one way to look at it. Institutions have access to it. Individuals can also subscribe to it, but it's costly. It's pretty costly, okay? I don't know how to deal with that cost issue, but this is just one way. If you look at Web of Science, it has more than 18,000 journals indexed into Web of Science. But it has 1.3 billion cited references. So sometimes when you publish in good journals, you will see that in the end, your references sections have hyperlinks. When you click on it, it sends you to different papers. Right? Have you seen that? Right? Those are cited references. So every journal that is inside, imagine IJCHM, a journal, right? It's publishing since 1989. It has around 5,000-6,000 papers. So when we talk about 18,000, these are journals. These are papers, individual papers, cited references, okay? So over 1.3 billion papers are in Web of Science. I was talking about ISI or Clarivate Analytics. They have multiple products, just like any other company. They have multiple products, right? This is a company for education management or research management. Have you guys heard of Scholar One? Scholar One? It's a system where you submit your paper. So when you are done with a paper, you want to submit it to a journal, you go to Scholar One and create a profile and submit your paper, right? So Scholar One is one product. The other one is Journal Citation Report. It's a report that they publish every year to tell you what is the standing of different journals, and we'll talk about it later. Have you guys heard of EndNote? Yes? EndNote is a reference manager, right? So you can download your papers into it and referencing and all that. That also belongs to that company. And the last one is Web of Science, which is a database. So they include journals and papers into it. Web of Science have 4 categories because you have different disciplines, right? One of them is Arts and Humanities Citation Index, which is related, journals related to arts and humanities. The other one is Science Citation Index, journals that are related to hard sciences, physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, those type of things. Third one is Social Sciences Citation Index. For most of us who are in business and management, or psychology, or sociology, or these type of things, these are part of social sciences, right? So in the past, when we were talking about ISI, now it's no more ISI. Now it's Web of Science or Clarivate Analytics. But for most of us, it becomes SSCI, Social Sciences Citation Index. Okay? In hospitality and tourism, I just give you an example of this. There are maybe more than 200-300 journals. Okay? Only 13 of them are in SSCI. Only 13. Which means it's really the top journals, elite journals. So any journal which you would see, and it depends on which university you are from. Some universities use A, B, D, C ranking, some of them use ABS ranking, a lot of different rankings, right? But most of those journals which are in any of these rankings are the same journals, the journals that have a lot of quality, right? Top tier journals. The last one is Emerging Sciences Citation Index. So they recently announced it like 3-4 years ago, right? Why did they do it? So a lot of journals want to be in SSCI. right? Because it shows quality. But in order to go there, in the past it was a lengthy procedure, right? So they had to apply, blah, blah, blah. Now what they did is they created this Emerging Sciences Citation Index. So if I have a journal and I want to be in SSCI, first they will put me here. It's a pool. So they put me in there and then they observe my performance, the journal performance over 3-4 years to see what type of papers I publish, how many downloads I have, people cite it or people don't cite it, what type of authors submit the paper to me, who is on my editorial board and stuff like this. So after 3-4 years, once they see that I'm consistently overperforming or performing well, then from here, depending on what is the area of the journal, they move it either to Sciences Citation Index here or here, depending on what journal it is about. So that's what's happening right now. So if you have to publish in good journals, the easiest way is Social Sciences Citation. Is there anybody in the room who is from sciences, like hard sciences, physics, biology, chemistry, something like that? No? Most of us are in SSCI, right? So here is how you need to do. And I'll share, what I'll do is, I'll pass around the paper, so you put your email address on that paper. So by the time we are done, I'll send this PPT slides to all of you. Because the slides have a lot of links. So if you see all of these are hyperlinks, you can click on it and it can show you. So just imagine, if I want to see which journals are in hospitality, what I do is, it's very simple.
Very useful. Can remind us in the whole system.
Alright, so once you go to this website, it shows you all these different indexes, right? So right now, if you look here, I am in Social Sciences Citation Index, okay? I already showed you a few of these links. So if you look here, it shows Arts and Humanities, Science Citation, Social Science, and Emerging Science, right? So what I'll do is I'll just click on Social Sciences Citation Index. And now here, I would suggest you to go to this View Subject category. Okay, so once you go here, here are a lot of different disciplines. Okay, so let's say I want to see hospitality and tourism. So I click on this and I look at the journal list. So it gives me all the journals that are indexed in SSCI for hospitality and tourism. Okay, so there's Annals of Tourism Research, all this. So this is one way to find the right journal for you. Go to this SSCI, find if that journal is indexed anywhere or not. Now sometimes researchers need to keep, not sometimes, all the times you need to keep yourself updated with what's happening. Okay? So it's pretty much possible that today there's a journal that's in SSCI and you want to publish 5 years down the road and you would still think it's in SSCI, but it's possible that they have moved it out of SSCI. So always keep yourself updated whether the journal is still existing there or not. Okay? So that's one thing I wanted to clarify. All right.
Also, Scopus fertile ranking.
Yes. So I'm moving to that. So this is the first thing, okay? These are the top tier journals, right on the top. Journal citation report looks pretty much like this. So you have all these journals. Okay, so if let's say I wanted to have journal citation report for hospitality journals, all the journals would be like here with ISSN numbers, and then there are certain numbers, certain statistics that show how good is that journal, right? So one of them is how many times the journal has been cited, or the papers from that journal have been cited. It creates their impact factor, then their 5-year impact factor, and we'll talk about what is impact factor, right? So quite a lot of numbers and statistics to show which journal is the best, in terms of impact factor or whatever. Okay, some other methods to find the journals. One is SSCI master list, right, which I just showed you. So you go here, you find the journal. The other one is Scopus. So SSCI is number one, Scopus is number two. Now, my experience is, and correct me Mustafa if I'm wrong, all the journals that are in SSCI are also in Scopus. But all the journals that are in Scopus are not in SSCI because Scopus is number two. It's like all the PhDs have masters, but all the masters do not have PhD, right? So it's pretty much like that. So how do you do with Scopus? So again, you go to Google, okay, here's the website, shimagojr.com, and once you come here, it's going to ask you about the journal list.
It's not switching.
Oh, so bad. Yes. So this is the website, SJR, okay, which shows the Chicago journal and country rank. You can put name of a journal here, you can do that. If you don't want to do that, you simply go to journal rankings. Once you come here, it shows all subject areas, right? So you need to find out, you need to, classify it further. So let's say if you want to look at, again, hospitality and tourism, I'll go to business management. Okay, so these are the journals for business management, which are 1,605 journals. I go to subject categories. These are all different subject categories. In the end is tourism and hospitality. So now I have 101 tourism and hospitality journals that are Scopus indexed. Okay, so again, I can go here and find. So if you remember the previous page, this one, Annals of Tourism Research, it's also here. Okay, so it's all in Scopus. Now, in Scopus, again, you will see different numbers that show how well the journal is doing. So impact factor is basically copyright to, when we talk about impact factor, we always hear about impact factor. That's a copyright to Web of Science. So they look at the citations and all that and create impact factor, which we'll talk about. Scopus have another thing called SJR. That's similar to impact factor, but impact factor is copyright, so they can't use it. They have their own statistic. So this 3.027, 2.8, blah, 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 this is the SJR. Okay? So journals are always ranked about based on this number. The higher the number, the higher the quality of the journal is. So here's what you can look at, okay? And this one gives you more information, like it shows you where the journal is based. These are UK, US, so where the journal is based. And then the H index and how many papers they have, a lot of different things. Don't go into those details. So this is another way where you can find a right journal for you, okay? What's your research area?
Film studies.
What?
Film studies.
Film studies, wow. Where does this one come here? Communication.
Communication.
Or you can just type and search on something else, right?
Film.
Okay.
Documentary.
So this is
Yes.
arts and humanities, visual arts and performing arts, right? So if you go
Correct.
here, overthinking, you are intelligent, thank you. Alright, so these are different journals that are related to this area, right? So that's how you find it in Scopus, okay?
No, in this case, they say, they put this scenario, they asked us go to the Scopus website and then see for time.
But this is Scopus website. This
No,
is,
it's not the Scopus.
it's powered by Scopus. I'll show you now.
Oh, but my university, they said, go to the Scopus website
Oh,
directly.
yeah, I'm gonna come to it. I just moved.
But the problem is for some universities they don't have access to a Scopus. So can use SCR Mago. SCR Mago is
Yes.
exactly
Actually, if you look back on this is the latest update on the schema go.
Mhm.
You can actually also, they also already indexed Web of Science journals.
There.
Yeah, you can please
Okay.
scroll up.
Yeah, I'll go to it.
Uh.
But I just want to show you that it's developed by Imago Lab, but it's powered by Scopus. So whatever numbers you see, it comes from the data from Scopus. So, you know,
Maybe because of the policy, like,
what is it? Where is it? You are saying?
Try to search back the film. Yeah, you can see only on the only WS journals. They already indexed.
Oh,
Web of Science
okay. So
journals.
it's latest. I didn't know this.
Yeah, this is the latest update.
Interesting.
And maybe I could add up. There are also
Very
journals
interesting.
that were previously indexed by Scopus and were been removed by Scopus, but still been
Exist
included
here.
in this index. So,
Yeah. So, you know, these are all just different methods of finding the journal. Okay. Scopus, Mustafa is right. It's pretty expensive to subscribe to Scopus. So this is easier because it's all available here, right? But again, even if you want to look at any journal, like you click on this journal, you can even go for more details into that journal. So for some, okay, now journals always publish for different type of areas, right? So here, this journal, if you look at it for applied psychology, is pretty low. So like the papers that are related to applied psychology are pretty low. And then if you look at visual arts and performing arts, these are pretty good over the years. So even if applied psychology in 2008, the journal was not very good, it moved to better, and then last 4 years it's pretty good for applied psychology. So what we do is we divide 50 by 100 and that's 0.5 impact factor. So now, as let's say I'm editor or Jihan is the editor, he wants to increase the impact factor, right? Every editor wants to increase the impact factor for their journal. So how do they do? One is by increasing or decreasing the number of papers published. But he can't do that because publishers cannot allow him to increase or decrease how many papers they publish every year. So that number is pretty much fixed number. That 100 is pretty much fixed. Okay, so you can't really play with that. You can't do 100 papers published in 2 years and next 2 years you publish 200 papers. You can't do that. That's pretty much fixed number. So what's the other thing to do? We need to increase this number. So let's say if instead of 50 it's 500, my impact factor will be what? 5, right? That is why a lot of editors even ask people to cite their papers if it's relevant and all that, so that the citations go up. The more citations, the higher the impact factor. Okay? Now, when it comes to, yes, this is what it is about impact factor. All right. This is another software which is called Publish or Perish. Have you heard of this? You might have heard of Publish or Perish as a phrase, but it's actually a software. It's a scholar who developed a software called Publish or Perish, right? So what you can do is in Publish or Perish, you can also see the journals in terms of their impact factor. So here it actually shows you the papers in terms of their importance towards creating impact factor. So for example, here I have looked at all the papers published in a certain journal, right? So let's say the top journal in hospitality was IJCHM last year. So I wanted to see what made IJCHM high citation. So I need to see which paper is mostly cited in IJCHM, right? Because citations increase impact factor. So this website helps me with that. So if you look at, these are all the papers in that journal, and it shows me how many times these papers are cited. So number 1 is 155, this journal, this article, and the author of this article is actually coming for this conference tomorrow, so he'll be here, Kisangu. So this is what it is. So that's how we look at which papers contribute more towards the journal, right? This software is actually free for a couple of months, free subscription. So I would recommend you go and download it. It gives you a lot of information. All right. So Dr. Jan, you said some questions.
Yes.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the room as well? So I just want to take a brief.
Let's take the questions from here quickly. About 400 people watch this online, on stream, on Facebook. So one person asked this question to you, Faizan. says that, let me find it. You have a lot of praises from people, so
Thank
that's
you.
all good. Raisal Ismail, if you are watching online, I'm asking your question. I wonder why some journal in the SSI ranked under C category in ABDC.
Okay, so again, I said every country use a different way of looking at quality control, right? So for example, just imagine, let's put the journals on a side, just imagine air quality control, air quality, right? So in America, the air quality control is very stringent, very strict. So even a little bit pollution, it makes a big mess, right? Even a little bit, because very, very strict. Or the cleanliness of the food. You go to restaurant, they have very strict quality control in restaurants. But if you walk in Vietnam, you see the street food, it's so funny, right? The person is cleaning the sweat and then making your food, right? People eat it, no problem, right? So still there are some quality control things here, but very little, very low, very soft, right? So this journal listing is pretty much like that. Some countries use very, very strict criteria to keep the journal. So for example, in Australia, they use Australian Business Dean Council, ABDC ranking. They have category 4, category 3, 4+, something like that. So imagine I showed you Web of Science. Web of Science has around 15 journals from hospitality and tourism. But ABDC has only 3 in 4+. So just 3 journals, and those 3 journals are extremely difficult to publish in. So it's just that strictness of the quality for different countries, or what they use, right? So it's just that. And even in countries like Malaysia, okay, you have some very good universities, some middle level universities, and some very bad universities, right? So let's say right now in Malaysia, the top university is which is University of Malaya, right? Is that what it is? Right? So if you look at they have much more stricter quality control things. So you only have certain journals you can publish in, right? But if you go to any normal university somewhere in very far area, then you publish whatever you want. So it's basically that quality control thing. Okay, any questions from the room? Yes, no? No? If no questions, it means either I am very good or either I'm very bad.
Very good.
Very good.
Then how to find
One more comment.
Yes, yes.
Excuse me, how to find predatory journals?
Okay, I'll come to that.
Stan Ivanov
Mhm.
from Bulgaria, our good friend, he's making a short comment, not a question, so I'm going to read it. Maybe the site score and the impact factor show the average number of citations of a journal's papers in a particular year. They are not measures of quality.
Yes.
Mary Madanoğlu also replied to this comment from Stan. I agree, sometimes a trendy topic will pick up 100 citations in a month. How can we assess quality based on just citations? We can't. Can we assess impact? Not sure.
Yes, I actually was going to talk about this thing. That's why I left the Google Scholar thing up there. So this is a very good point. Fortunately and unfortunately, one is, yes, it's right that impact factor is based on citations. So citations do not really show the quality of the paper. It just shows how many people are citing your journal or the papers published in the journal. But unfortunately, many people associate it with the quality of the journal, because so far we are all working in the universities, and we know that basically the highest impact factor journals are kept atop, so you have to publish in them, right? In my opinion, it's unfortunate. I don't believe in that, but that's how the system is. Now, to come to the point that maybe there's a trendy topic, people cite it more, and that I'll talk about this very soon, probably next slide. So, Google Scholar is important for that one. Okay. Now, based on my experience talking to some research, so we already talked about how to find the right journal. You said predatory journal,
Yes.
right? So predatory journal, I already said, you have to look at their regulations or the guidelines, what type of guidelines they have, what type of papers they have published, okay? Who is on their editorial board, okay? Let's say Dr. Jihan, he is a famous scholar of hospitality. If they, and every morning, I'm pretty sure every morning he wake up, he might have 10 invitations like, we have this journal, you come and be our editorial board. right? Do you go there? No. You never go there because you also realize that this is not a good journal. So when you, as authors, you look at the editorial board, in your area, there must be some famous scholars, right? If you see some of the famous scholars in the editorial board, you should realize it's a good journal. It's just a basic rule, okay? I mean, it's not the only rule, but it's a basic rule to look at it. That's what I do actually when I publish. So if there are people in the editorial board that are well known in my area, I know them, I have seen their research, very good research, then those journals are the right journals.
Excuse me. What about the JSTOR? JSTOR? You know?
Yes, it's also
substantial.
Yeah. JSTOR is also a very good publisher. It's just that they are not as prominent as some other publishers.
Yeah, right.
And also, you need to know that some publishers are heavy on a certain discipline. Okay, so let's say Emerald is pretty big on business management, tourism, travel, and all those type of things, right? But if and education, if you go to education, they have many journals. But some areas they might only have 2 or 3 journals, so it's not very prominent. So since your area is film studies and all that stuff, actually, because it's not my area, so I don't know which publisher publishes the best journals in that area. Okay. Alright, so again, based on my experience, I've been asked a lot of questions by students, so I just put some of them here. One question which you might have heard a lot, and that is how many papers can be published with one data set? So once you have one data set, how many papers do we publish with that, right? In my opinion, it really depends on you, and it really depends on your data set, okay? You can publish 2 papers from one data set, you can publish 3 papers from one data set if there is substantial contribution in each paper you are publishing. If you just move one variable up and down, then it makes no sense. There's no contribution in there, right? So if the data set is making contribution in each paper you are publishing, then it's okay. But my experience, if you have a good data set, and your data set you want to make contribution, most probably 2, or really at most would be 3. You can't really go beyond that, right? Because it's just one data set, so how much you can play with it. The second thing is the words, figures, and data must be original. This is so important because this is the age of internet, right? So when you publish something, that publication is on the internet, and many people have it. So if you make any unethical thing with your figure, with your data, with your tables, I don't know, sometimes 20 years later that can come back and bite you. So make sure that everything you put in your paper is original, okay? Some people, especially SEM, okay, especially when we use structural equation modeling, people play with things, okay? It's so funny. You know, sometimes what happens is this. I have actually seen people doing this. So if, let's say you have one construct with 3 items, right? You do SEM, okay? Let's say you have this, loading is 0.710, 0.702, 0.636, okay? Okay, I get this, and now I don't know what to do, okay? Only I know is people have told me, or my supervisor told me, my students told me, or my friends told me, the loading should be higher than 0.7. I'm looking at it and I say, okay, what happens? Nothing, I'll just make it 0.736. I've seen this happening, okay? Now, I just do it, because I don't know, right? And later I see AVE. Okay, since these numbers, AVE actually comes from these numbers, right? It's calculated based on these numbers. So let's say earlier with whatever this was, I'm just making up, I'm not that good in maths to calculate AVE right now, okay? So 0.492, let's say this was my original AVE. So I changed this one, then I'm looking at this, oh, this is 0.492, and I was told it should be higher than 0.5.
Can change to 0.6.
Oh, let's just do it 0.5. All good, right? I'm so happy, my numbers are so good, let's submit it. Then I'd go to a person like me, who has nothing to do. I look at these numbers, I'm like, wow, how is it possible? Like 0.7, 0 to 0.710, 0.736, how is it 0.5? It just doesn't make sense. So I calculate it. So simple, okay? How simple is the calculation? I square this, square this. Whatever values come, I average them, divide by 3. I get this number. Wow, the number is so different. So I clearly know, okay, you have played with your numbers, okay? Because you know, sometimes we say that monkeys are very clever. They copy people, right? But you have to have some common sense to copy things. So sometimes these type of things happen, and this is a very basic example. People can actually know a lot of things, because remember, statistics are not magic. It's not like you do it and some number come from nowhere. Every number you put in there is calculated from another number and from another number. And really, people like Mustafa, who are very good, can go back from your final results to your original data set. Okay, so people can go back. Sometimes what happens is, those of you who use Amos, right? Amos, do you know?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Amos has another thing. It has error terms. Right? It's something like this. My goodness of fit index is not good. Okay, what I do is, let's go vary the error terms. Oh, nice. I do these type of things, my goodness of fit become like fitness indices become good. Now, the thing is, there's nothing wrong with that. If you do this, report it. Say that you have co-varied the error terms. Don't report this. If you do this, don't say I cut it and I change it to 0.5. This is not ethical. But if you do this, you should report it. Okay? That's this one. So if your data is there, there's some error in your data, you should really report it truthfully. Tell people that you have done this. Okay? Collaborations, very important, extremely important. Now, collaborations means that you need to find people who are good at certain things and you work together with them, right? How much is 1 plus 1? 2. How much is 1 and 1? 11. So you basically need to create synergy, 1 and 1, not 1 plus 1. 1 plus 1 means you have some good points, another person have good points, he do his stuff, you do your stuff. It's not going to do any good. What you need to do is mix your strengths together to create one thing, right? That's synergy. Collaboration, very important, because we are not perfect at everything we do, right? So people, like imagine one paper, when you write a paper, how many different skills do you need? You need to have precision, you need to have accuracy, you need to have statistical skills, you need to have critical thinking, you need to have writing skills, you need to have information gathering, you need to have some sort of English background, knowing your literature, and a lot of things, right? So you need to have people who are good at certain things to be your partners who work on something. Now, having said that, I always hear one question that's very interesting. My supervisor have not helped me. Do I put his name on my paper or not? Right? Do we hear this a lot? Like I come, my supervisor don't help me, and should I put his name or not? No? Where's your supervisor? Don't say it to your supervisor. Otherwise you will come to me like, because of you I failed. Okay. I think you should look at it differently. Okay. When I was a PhD student, sorry Dr. Muslim, you might see it later. I was not happy. Okay. My supervisor pushed me a lot. At that time,
He's watching.
yes. At that time I was not happy. Okay?
So be careful.
I said sorry first. I said sorry first. So Dr. Muslim pushed me a lot. I was not, start 1 month I'm not happy. Oh my God. I gave him everything, he said it's not good, go back. I'm like, what is this? Okay? But now, like when I finished my PhD and I imagined the first day I entered his office, the first day, and then I imagined the day I was getting my degree, and then I imagined the difference between my like those two time frames and how much I've changed and how much I've developed and how much my abilities have changed in terms of questioning things. So yes, maybe your supervisor have not put comments on your paper, but your supervisor might have contributed a lot than you think. So that's why you should add his name or her name on your papers, because it's not only the thing about that paper, but overall grooming of you as researcher. Having said that, there are some unethical things that supervisors do as well. And I'm so lucky to have supervisors who have never pushed me to do things like that. And that is, my supervisor might tell me, I have a friend, how about you put my friend's name on your paper as well? We have supervisors who say, okay, you do all the job and then put my name as first author, right? Things like that shouldn't happen. That's unethical. But overall, your supervisors push you along the way. It's like 3-4 years journey, so it's a lot of stuff. Okay, and sometimes you also do not know, your supervisors also help you on the background. You don't know that in the front, but on the back they really push for a lot of things. So that's about collaborations. Every author on the paper should make a substantive contribution to the paper, which means that every person that is on the paper should have done something in that paper. In fact, some of the journals, like top tier journals, Tourism Management, Annals of Tourism Research, they are now asking you to actually say what every author has done in that paper. So recently I submitted a paper in tourism management, so I have to actually write, okay, what did I do? I worked on the introduction and development of the model. This person did the data collection and data analysis. So you actually have to say what you have done, really. So that's another thing. Now this is also important. So let's say I come to this conference, I met some of you, like I said, Grace, her work is very similar to mine. Let's say she asked me, do you want to work with me on my paper? I said, okay, of course, no problem. Then she go back, she write her paper, she put my name, her supervisor name, and sent to the journal without her supervisor being aware of it. Obviously, when the paper comes back or publish or reject or whatever, your supervisor would be very upset. Why you didn't tell your supervisor about it? You are putting another person's name on the paper. Now, maybe I've done a lot of work on that paper, right? So I'm not saying you shouldn't add more people to your paper, but if you do it, you should make sure that other authors on the paper should know it, okay? Adding or removing people, you should tell everybody, okay? It goes the other way as well. Let's say we decide I'm gonna work with her, she does all the things, she sent me the paper, I'm so busy, I do not reply back or whatever, and she really needs to publish it. So she removed my name and submitted. Yes, I was really bad not replying you, but before you remove my name, you should actually send me an email saying like, maybe you are busy, we can work together in the future, but right now I really need to get it done, so maybe I'll take you off this paper and in the future we can work. So that should be with full disclosure. Everybody on that paper should know what's happening, okay? Otherwise it's not ethical. All right, publication process. So for authors, what happens is you submit a paper and then after 1 week you want the decision, right? I submitted a paper, now I really need to know if it's accepted or rejected. It's not that simple. Like when you submit a paper, there's so many steps that are happening on the background, right? What's happening? So I'll show you what happens with certain journals, especially the journals published by Elsewhere. This is from Elsewhere, but any other journal does the same thing with some modifications. So what happens is this: you submit. When you try to submit a journal, you initiate the submission, you submit all the files, and you click the submit button, right? So it goes away. Now what happens is it goes to the journal. Okay, what does this mean? So some big journals, some really big journals who have submissions over 1,000 or 1,200 submissions a year, they have editorial assistants. Okay, so what those assistants do is they look at the paper, they make sure the paper is formatted right, it's the right paper for the journal and all that stuff, and then they say, okay, this paper is good enough to proceed further. Okay, if the formatting is not good, if you submit a film studies journal to tourism management, those type of things, the editorial assistant will desk reject your paper. Okay, but if the paper is good in that initial thing, then what will happen is it will go to the editor. Okay, so if it's a small journal, the editor makes these decisions. But if it's a big journal with 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 submissions, then they have sub-editors or coordinating editors. Like I'm coordinating editor. So the editor-in-chief will send that paper to me to deal with it. Okay, so what will happen is the editor will invite a sub or coordinating editor. The paper comes to me, I look at the paper, then I try to read the paper, and then I try to find out a few reviewers. So let's say I get a paper, the paper is related to residents and destination attractiveness and stuff like this. So I know, okay, Mustafa is an expert in this area. So I send the paper to, not the paper, but an invitation to him, and which I did recently though, if you want to review this paper or not. So what I will do is, I will invite the reviewers. Sometimes, normally we need 2 reviewers, right? Normally we need 2 reviewers, but I don't know how many reviewers are going to accept it, and there's time pressure, so sometimes I'll send it to 4 or 5 reviewers, right? So once the reviewers are invited, and if they accept to review, then the paper goes under review. Okay, now the reviewers are reviewing the paper. Once 2 reviewers, or whatever is the required number of reviewers, so for some journals it's 3 reviewers, for some journals it's 5 reviewers, you know, so once those reviews are submitted, then the paper is ready for decision, right? So I get the reviewers as coordinating editor. So Mustafa sends his review, I get it. Let's say Grace sends the review, I get it. So I have enough reviews, so I look at the reviews, I look at the paper, and based on the reviewers recommend. Now remember, maybe the reviewers say that the paper should be accepted, but as an editor, I see major problems with the paper, so I can still reject the paper. And it is other way as well. Maybe the reviewers think the paper should be rejected, but as an editor, I feel the paper has a lot of work, so I might send it to another 1 or 2 reviewers to see what do they think, right? So it's like this. Once I make the decision on the paper as coordinating editor, let's say I say accept the paper, then it go to the editor-in-chief, right? Main editor of the journal. Then that editor will make the decision. Decisions are 3 types: either accept, either reject. That's straightforward, right? So if all the reviewers say reject the paper gets rejected. If all the people say accept the paper is accepted. Most of the times you will not get directly acceptance. It's really, really rare. It just does not happen. Most of the times you will either get rejected or revision. So you have to revise the paper based on what the reviewers has recommended, right? Once that's done, so as an author you get the decision. Let's say if it's accepted, if it's rejected, then it's end of the story, right? It's rejected. But if it's accepted, it goes to the production. The production do the proofreading, proofing, put all the references, and then it's published. If it's revised, then what authors do is they revise the paper, they resubmit the revised paper. Once it's resubmitted, if it's small changes, the editor make the decision. Look at the changes, look at the response, and then accept or reject whatever. But if there are major changes, then it goes back to the full circle. So it goes back again to invite the reviewers and blah, blah, blah. Now, most of the times what happens is we spend a lot of time in these 2 steps. We send invitation to review. Let's say now I am here in this conference for 6 days. I really don't have time to look at my email and everything. So imagine the first day somebody sent me an invitation to review the paper. I probably haven't seen it. So I might respond to that editor 6 days later. So it's waste time, right? I don't do that though. I'm pretty much on top of it, but just an example. People travel a lot, people have other issues, some people are on sabbatical and a lot of things. So a lot of time is wasted in inviting reviewers, and then they accept it, sometimes they forget it, so you have to send reminders, finish the review, blah, blah, blah. And then all these steps take a lot of time. In revision, again, so let's say you submit a paper, it's revised, you submit it back. Now, as editor, my first choice will be to send it to the same reviewers who reviewed it the first time, right? So send it to them, see how. But most of the time, they would not want to review it again because of time issues, or they think they already reviewed it, blah. So then I have to find new reviewers, right? Because I can't go to the existing. So those new reviewers look at the paper as a fresh paper, because remember, new reviewers do not get the previous revised version, like they don't get the previous reviewer comments. So for them, it's a new revision. So they might even give you much more things to change later on. So you know that takes a long time. And that's why this whole publishing process becomes so difficult. One good thing that a lot of publishers are doing now is ahead of publishing, ahead of print publishing or early sight. What does that mean? It simply means this. So every journal has a fixed number of papers that they can publish. Let's say every year most of the journals every year publish around 50 to 55 papers, right? But do you know how many submissions do each journal get? Like IJCHM gets over 1,200 submissions a year. How many do you, you can't just sit there and keep rejecting the papers, right? If the papers are good, you can't reject them. maybe, okay, out of 1200 you reject 800, but the 400 you still have that year. You can only publish 55. What happens to the other 350? They go in the backlog, right? Next year you get more submissions, so they just keep going. I had a time where my paper was accepted in 2013 and published in 2016. By the time it's published, nobody wants to read that paper. It's already outdated, right? So now a lot of journals, what they're doing is, in fact, Jihan's journal, a lot of Emerald journals, as soon as your paper is accepted, within a week or so, it gets online. It does not have a volume number, it does not have an issue number or a page number, but it's online so that people can read it and cite it, okay? So that's the whole process. Very, very important few things in this review process. One is, remember, reviewers do this out free of charge. If I review papers, I don't get paid for it, not at all. I just give my time to the discipline. So as authors, we should be respectful of that thing. As authors, we should respect that reviewers are reviewing it. Yes, sometimes things are not like that. Sometimes reviewers are really, harsh comments like, how did you write this or that. Most of the times, reviewers are pretty helpful. They have very, very good critique on your paper. So you really need to understand that critique. My own personal formula, which I used to do in the past, I don't do it anymore because it got me more in trouble than for benefit. So in the past, what I would do is, as soon as I would get a note from the editor about whatever the result from the review is, I would just read it at that time. And sometimes it would make me so crazy and upset, like what the hell are they talking about, right? So my suggestion, if you get some sort of decision on your paper, don't read it right away. Give it a time, like give it 1 day or 2 days. If it's rejected, of course, or if it's revision even. After 2-3 days, when you are a bit normal, read it again. Read it carefully, see what are they trying to tell you. I mean, if the editor wanted to reject your paper, they would just reject it. But if they are sending you revision to revise it, they want to publish your paper, but they want you to make the changes. So read it carefully, try to make those changes. Sometimes reviewers do not know a lot of things, right? So they might just make a comment, but you think this is not right. So it's completely fine to go against the reviewer. Most of the times you should avoid that. But it's completely fine if you think the reviewer is saying something wrong. You can always comment with respect, saying that I appreciate your comment, but this is what's happening. Okay? So it's completely fine. Like, editors are completely fine, because at the end of the day, the editor reads the whole thing and makes the decision. Okay? Response to reviewer is another very, very important thing. So when you are making changes in your paper, make sure you use track changes in Microsoft Word so that we know what are you changing in your paper. And also there's another document which is called response to reviewers, where you put the comment from the reviewer and then respond to it. Okay? I give you an example. I was so frustrated one time. I get a paper to review from Malaysia. Later I know who the authors were. Like in the start I didn't know, but later I got to know. I get a paper to review. I spent so much time to review that paper. Many major changes, right? So I asked to change the things. The paper come back. Obviously there were some changes, a lot of changes, but I don't know where the changes were, because there's no track changes, there's no response to reviewers, nothing. I could barely see what the changes are. So I sent back a note to the authors saying that, can you please highlight the changes? So the paper come back. Would you imagine the paper was entirely highlighted from the title till the last reference? It's like all yellow. You know, it's just so funny. And what did I do? Like, imagine I rejected the paper. Because it's just so bad, you know. I mean, we are all grown-up researchers, so we need to be careful with that, right? Another thing which is important is you submit your paper to a journal, you get very good comments, but your paper is rejected. What you do is send it to another journal the next day. Now let me tell you, my field is very small, very small. I actually got a paper from IJHM, I rejected the paper, okay, with very good comments. 3 days later, I get email from IJCHM, same paper. I look at this, and I'm like, did I see it? Yes, I think I see it. So I read the paper, and the first paragraph, I'm like, I read this paper already, right? So I go back in my records, and I see I already gave these comments, but the paper is not changed at all. So I send an email to Fevzi, who's the editor. I'm like, Dr. Okumush, what do I do? Like, this paper I already rejected. they didn't make any changes and all this. You know, first my fear was, did they submit it to 2 journals or not? So Fevzi said they submitted this morning. So then I know that, okay, it's submitted today. My revision, you know, my review was a couple of days ago. What I did, the paper has no change. So I copy paste my review from the previous journal to this journal, reject and send back. So, see, it's okay to submit your paper to another journal, but if there are some comments, make sure you deal with those comments, because most in smaller disciplines, like our discipline, it's a very, very big chance that your paper might end up with same reviewers, okay? And if it does not happen, you know what? Sometimes these reviewers, because they're all good friends, they talk to each other. Sometimes I share this type of experiences with Dr. Jehan. And it's very possible, like today I'm talking to him, the next day he gets a reviewer invitation and then he sees the same paper, right? So please make sure if you are getting comments, make sure you change those things and then go ahead. All right, very important, before you submit your paper, go to the author guidelines, read them carefully, make sure you format your paper accordingly, because it's showing disrespect to the editor and the journal if you just submit it without reading. Okay, so make sure you format your paper before you submit it. And most of the journals have very detailed author guidelines. In fact, the journal we are editing, we have Mohitin, you might have seen him outside. He is very detailed, very, very detailed. So he made those author guidelines so detailed. He even put, like when you put the bullet point, it should be 3 centimeters from the border. This one should be there. Ask him like, what are you doing? So for most of the times, it's all good, okay? So just follow this. Some of the journals are now moving to another philosophy, which is your paper, your way. Elsewhere journals are doing it, which means the initial submission, you can make it any format you like, but make sure it's consistent. Like, don't do APA and Harvard and all mixed together, right? It's one format, it's okay, you submit it. Once the paper is accepted, then you may want to reformat it into whatever their format is. So that's what it is. We have 10 more minutes, so I'm going to cruise through very quick. What makes a good paper? Okay, so when we talk about paper, what is it that makes a paper a good paper? Originality. Okay, what's new in your paper? That's the most important thing. So if you are publishing something, your paper should be original. What's new in your paper? What is it that you are telling people that they didn't know in the past? Okay? So the originality can be in the topic. Your topic can be original. Your methods can be original. Your methods can be new methods. Your results can be original. So sometimes, and especially in developing countries, and you may share this with me. Let's say you do your analysis and your hypotheses are not significant. Your path relationships or path effects are not significant. What will happen? What will happen? Anybody have experienced this? You do the analysis and your p-value is over 0.05. What do? Delete that hypothesis, right? Delete it, just let it go, you know. Or if, let's say, all your hypotheses are not significant, then your supervisor or examiner might say, like, what have you done? And you say, what have I done? I just did analysis. It just showed me these type of results, right? You haven't done anything, you just collect data. So sometimes your results, even not significant, can show some original things. My entire PhD dissertation was based on something like this. So normally we know that satisfaction leads to loyalty, right? Satisfaction leads to loyalty. But a report says that 70% of satisfied people are not loyal. Okay? Let's say one time I was traveling in Emirates. Okay, on the airport, they just gave me a free upgrade to business class. I was so happy, the happiest person in the world, right? Business class free, so good, extremely satisfied. Am I loyal? No, I cannot afford it. I can't go back again and again, right? I can't just pay them again and again for that. So maybe satisfied people are not loyal, okay? My PhD dissertation was based on this, no significant relationship. So what makes people loyal if not satisfaction, something like that. So sometimes your results can also be original, which are something that people haven't seen before. Okay, so if something is not significant, you may want to explain why do you think it's not significant. It's a lot of good insight. Relevance and extension to existing knowledge. So your study should be relevant to existing things, and that's why we always do literature review, right? Your literature review is relevant to what you are doing, and your paper should extend the information, the existing knowledge. You shouldn't keep circling the existing knowledge. You should extend it a little bit. And how do you do that? By bringing new subjects or new methods or new results, so stuff like this. Methodology. This is another common mistake, or I would say methodology makes your paper really, really work. Okay, because methodology is like this. Who is from Vietnam? You're from Vietnam? Yes? Okay. Let's say I like Vietnamese food, okay? Pho? Pho. Okay. I ask you how to make pho. So you will tell me the method, right? How to do it. If you don't tell me that method, I will never imagine how can you make pho, right? So it's the same with dissertations, it's the same with thesis, with research papers. You need to tell people what type of methods you have used, what was the process you have gone through, right? But that's not enough. You also need to say, why are you doing this? Okay? I have seen people who say, I did a survey. Why did you do it? Why you didn't do interview? I did PLS. Why did you do PLS? Why you didn't do any other thing? So when you say I've done this, you also need to justify why you have done this. Okay, so that's methodology. Communication. Going back to collaboration, most of the times we work with groups, right? Multiple people work in a group and on one paper. So one person did the introduction, another person did the literature, another person did analysis, and then another person did conclusion. 4 different writing styles. In the end, we just copy paste all the 4 things without any coherence, without any mixing up. Editors, reviewers, when anybody who reads the paper can clearly see that it's done by different people, without any collaboration, proper collaboration. So that's another thing that makes a good paper. Make sure your paper has clarity, the structure should be there, and the writing should be quality writing. Okay? The last one is convincing. That means that any argument that you make, and this can be in your introduction, literature is not really important, but your introduction, your methodology, your results, and your conclusions, any arguments that you make, those should be convincing. Convincing means you should have really strong support to whatever you are saying. You can't just say, I thought about it. It should be convincing and logical, okay? Theoretical and practical implications, again, very important. So what, okay? Sometimes we get papers where people say, I have looked at how physical or how service quality impact satisfaction. Okay, yes, you looked at it. So what? I mean, what should we do with this? So you need to explain how are you contributing to the literature, how are you contributing to the industry, what should people do after reading your paper, how is it helping them, okay? All right, recency and relevancy of the references, very important again. I get papers to review and literally I can show you my reviews. I get papers in 2018. The latest reference in that paper is from 2011, 2012. So in last 6 years, there's a lot of changes, but if you haven't read those papers, it means you don't really know what you are doing because things are changing so fast. So your references should be very relevant and recent, okay? Your paper should also bring internationality. It's now a new trend. Many journals are now moving away from cross-sectional data, which is you just go one time, you collect data, you come back and you say this, this, this. Now more people are moving more towards multiple data sets from multiple countries, multiple cultures, so you can show the contrast. Okay, some people, okay, if you have a model, you test that model in China and you test that model in US, it gives you a lot of difference of opinion, so you can write much more in implications, okay? This is the last one, you have to read the editorial scope and things that we talk about. And the title, okay, title is so important. Title can make or break the deal. I like, I don't remember who said this, I think Professor Ramaya said this in Malaysia, but there was, do you guys know Cronbach Alpha? Cronbach Alpha, right, we all know that, right? So there was a paper done on Cronbach Alpha, and that paper was trying to say that Cronbach Alpha is good, but it's no more relevant, right? So the paper was, thank you Cronbach Alpha, we have to move on, something like that. Thank you Cronbach Alpha, we have to move on. Imagine if that paper was rest in peace Cronbach Alpha. Goodbye Cronbach Alpha. You know, it just won't make sense because always you have 2 types of people. People who love something, people who hate something. So people who hate Cronbach Alpha, and if they see a title, Goodbye Cronbach Alpha, they would be very happy. But then half those people who like Cronbach Alpha would be very upset. But if you say, thank you Cronbach Alpha, it's time to move on, you are bringing both those people in, right? Titles are so important. And with title is the abstract. So even our time is finished, there are a couple of more things, but one thing I definitely want all of you to read. Okay, this is a paper I recently saw, and I was so happy to read this paper. This paper is actually looking at if you have a data set, how can you analyze the data set? So I don't know if you can read this or not. Can you guys read this? So I just want you to look at the title and the abstract. Can you people read it, or do you want me to read it?
You
Read it. Okay, 7 ways of looking at a data set. So that's the title. The abstract is this. A literary theorist, a biologist, a historian, a writing studies scholar, and a poet walk into a wine bar. The poet says, I have got a stack of 1,223 handwritten questionnaire responses here in my bag. Would you like to have a look? The others reply, sure, let's see what we can learn here. Descending from their respective disciplinary perches, they all gather around the table and start spiffing through the questionnaires, which chronicle the writing background, habits, and emotions of PhD students and faculty in 15 countries. In this single corpus of data, each researcher sees something different, and from the other researchers' responses, each learns new ways of seeing. What counts as an appropriate data analysis? What, for that matter, counts as data? We invite you to grab a drink and join our conversation. It's an abstract, academic abstract, but it's just so inviting, right? So when you read it, you really want to read that paper. Sometimes it's just so boring, right? The purpose of this study is this, I did this, and now my studies are this. You know, so that's just an example to show you how to make a catchy title, and sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not possible, but you have to be creative with things. All right. Do we need to finish now? Or can I go like 15 minutes over? Can I go 15 minutes over? Or do you want to finish?
It's up to you. It's okay with us.
Okay? Yeah. If anybody wants to leave, you guys can leave. But you know, it's about to finish. So these are some common mistakes that people make when they submit papers. These are non-fatal, which means they are not going to kill you, but these are things which you should avoid before submitting your paper. One of them is formatting issues and problems. It's a major no for a lot of people, because that's the first thing people look at, right? You submit your paper, people look at your formatting, and that shows how considerate you are as a researcher. So that's one thing. Sending it to the wrong editor or journal. So wrong journal makes sense, okay? You send your film studies paper to my hospitality journal, okay? Not good. But sometimes what happens is you have a cover letter, right? You write a cover letter, and as I said, your paper is rejected, you are submitting it to another journal without changing that cover letter. So sometimes Jihan might get a paper with a cover letter that's saying, Dear Fevzi, IJCHM, please get my paper. It happens. And it's not a big mistake, it just is something people shouldn't do it. It's just not good, you know. Long title, the effect of physical and social servicescape on emotions and customer satisfaction and behavioral intention in Malaysia and China, a comparison of generation X, Y, and Z. It's like a whole abstract. So that is something not good. Grammatical and spelling errors. Most of us are not from English-speaking countries, with some exceptions, and there's no problem with that, but it's just not good submitting your papers with grammatical errors and spelling errors. Too few or too many references. I talked about it earlier. Sometimes the paper is 6,000 words, but 9,000 words are references. It's just so crazy. And there's no way you can read all those things. And sometimes there are very, very few references. Like I said, sometimes the references are not relevant, not recent. So missing references is again something that a lot of people mind, because when reviewers get your paper to review, they are looking at something, let's say something looks very good or very bad, there's a reference, I go to the reference section, there's no reference for that citation, right? So then as a reviewer, I have to go and find that. It's extra things for me to do, right? So it just is not good in the review process. Revealing identity of authors, a lot of people do this, and believe me, it's so common to find, you know, in the paper, in methodology, and somewhere else, people mention different things, okay? So that type of thing is not good. Like, just give you an example, I recently came across a paper where the author said that in the methodology, normally you have to say what is your grant number or something like that, right? Where you got the grant or whatever. that type of information does not go to reviewers, but this particular person actually put it in methodology, somewhere very little, like this research was based on this grant number, which is very easily traceable, right? So if I want, I can actually see who the authors are. Not good at all. In fact, very honestly, I didn't want to say this, but I'm telling you, Mustafa submitted a paper recently to a journal. I get that paper. He didn't reveal his identity, but I know his research area and I know his writing style because we work together, right? So I sent an email to the editor saying like, the authors have done nothing. As a reviewer, I just don't feel good reviewing the paper because I know the authors. Okay, so I didn't review that paper, and I think I asked you as well later on, right? I asked you, Mustafa, did you submit this paper? So those type of things, but that's a coincidence, and you know there was nothing wrong, but sometimes people deliberately do that. Tables and figures are missing because many of us convert our thesis or dissertation into paper. So sometimes it says, please see figure 1 for blah blah blah, but then there's no figure 1. Right? So something like that shouldn't be done. Structured abstract is missing. This is again happening when you submit your paper to one place, then you submit it to another place. So let's say elsewhere want you to write abstract in one paragraph, but Emerald has a structured thing, right? So you have title, methodology, so you don't convert that into 2 or 3 different writing styles. Again, it's easily understandable that multiple people have worked on the paper. It should be avoided. Okay, these are some of the main reasons for rejection. So why editors or reviewers? I have worked in both the roles. So I have I've rejected papers as editor. I've also rejected papers as reviewer. These are some of the reasons why papers are rejected. One is the authors are not clear about what's the contribution of the paper, and obviously as reviewer, if the author is not giving me enough justification about contribution of the paper, I can't do anything about it, right? It's just no contribution. The paper is not well positioned about the journal. So let's say we have a journal called Journal of Destination Marketing and Management, which is specific to destinations, but somebody submits a paper about a casino or something like that. It just is not positioning well. Doesn't answer the so what question. I already talked about so what, so I'm not going to go into this. Yes, this is so important. So when we write the paper, right, when we just start, we are so excited about the idea. We talk to people, oh, this is my research, I want to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then when we write introduction, we are very excited. We promise a lot of things. Promise means we say this paper will do this, this, this. Then we do literature, it makes us so bored. Then we do analysis, it's just so long, right? When we are writing conclusion, we miss a lot of things which we promised in introduction. So your conclusion actually does not line with what was promised in introduction, right? So you promised a lot of things and then you didn't deliver. Imagine you go to a restaurant where when you are entering on the wall, it says, and this actually happened in America, it says buy one, get one free burger promotion, right? So you go inside, you buy one burger, they give you one burger. So you are looking at the person and ask, where's the other burger? So which other burger? So outside it says buy one, get one. Then they say it expired last year. Right? It's not good, right? So what was promised is not delivered. So it just happens that with the paper. An outdated literature review. And it's understandable. If you have a paper, your literature is very outdated, it just means that you are not sure if this is already done or not done. So major methodological problems, okay? Very, many people do these things. Okay, I just give you an example, maybe it's not major, for me it's a major problem, for a lot of people it's not, but let's say if you are doing SEM or if you are doing regression for your paper, it's a parametric test, right? So you need your data to be normally distributed. Many people don't do that. Many people just go do SEM and regression without actually testing if the data is normal or not. It's a problem because you know, it's just that you need something before doing another thing and you didn't do the first thing, so how you go to the second step? So it's just something like this. Replication of the previous study was a main reason for rejection for many people, but now journals are moving to it. And in fact, we have a very good friend, Fevzi, who is editor for IJCH, and he even says that if you are replicating a study, he will welcome it. But the thing is that when you replicate, you have to explain what are the differences. And me and Dr. Jihan, we are going to work on something he did 10, 12, 15 years ago. looking at what are the features of different hotels for business travelers, like different things that attract business travelers, right? So 15 years ago, there was no Wi-Fi, there were no voice activation things, a lot of things. Now we want to replicate that study again. So we'll see what are the differences, what are the things that are obsolete, that went out, what are new things. So it's going to give us so much more to talk about, right? So replication should be done with a purpose, why you are doing it. Or let's say there's a study done in China, and I want to replicate that study in the US. So I can do replication, but I have to explain what are the differences and what do those differences mean for people, okay? Plagiarism, again, so important. Many people do this. Plagiarism include a lot of different things. Many people submit a paper in one language, then they submit it in another language, or find a paper in one language, translate it, and then submit it to an English journal with their name. You know, so it's plagiarism, even if it's different languages. One question that is asked a lot is if I am copying things from my own work, like I have done a thesis or dissertation, now I want to convert it into a paper, what do I do with that? So it's really, there's no straight answer to this. For some people, self-plagiarism is accepted. For some people, it's not accepted. But majority of the people don't like it. So even if it's coming from your thesis or dissertation, you need to make sure one thing, when you are doing your thesis dissertation, when you finish and then you convert it into a paper, it requires a lot of time. So you need to update your study. If things have changed, you need to update your study for the paper. And then also rephrase it in a way where you are not copying chunks of things from your work. You rephrase that. For me, it makes sense because when you are doing your dissertation, you are writing 300, 200 pages. It's a lot of write-up. Or some people do 60,000, 80,000, 100,000 words. Paper is 6,000 words. You have to really shrink down the things, right? But when you shrink things, you don't want to lose the things. So you have to make it concise. So it automatically will change your writing, right? You have to mix things. So some people copy. In my opinion, you shouldn't do that. Not telling an interesting story, I just gave you an example of the abstract. So how you can tell an interesting story, keep the readers involved in the things. Have not responded, we also talked about it. If you don't respond to reviewer comments properly in the right way, that's also another reason for rejection. Or failing the author guidelines. So that's it. Now I just want to tell you 6 strategies. How can you make sure your papers can make something good journals? Okay, 6 strategies. This part of my presentation is heavily inspired from a recent talk I took from Michael Tews. He is an associate professor in Pennsylvania State, and with his permission though, you know, I asked him if I can use this, and he said okay. But I've changed the things in it, but it's inspired from his talk. We are not going to go the quick go through, okay? No time. So just tell me this: do you believe publish or perish is true or false?
True.
True? You have to publish, right, in order to secure your position or get a good job or promotion and all that stuff. How about this?
Yes, correct.
Correct?
Correct. Yes.
Right? The more you read, the more you think, what is this?
Yeah.
Why I'm reading this, right? So in order to deal with these things, we have some strategies. But the last one is this one. Do you think this is the common way or reason for rejection of paper?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, many people, there's nothing new in this research, so reject it, right? Okay. So let's imagine this is a scenario, okay? You have collected data on customer satisfaction and loyalty with a sample of hotel guests in Sudan, and then you provide this justification in yellow. Do you think the paper will be accepted or rejected? Reject? Why? Because you are not making a strong case, right? So here are some strategies. Number 1, although something has been done a lot of times before, we still need research for it. Okay, this is one strategy. So there's something that has been done many times before. Let's say people use surf qual for service quality many times, right? But there's still some research needed. But you don't say it directly like that. You have to make sure that you are wording it in a way which makes it attractive to people.
And how? Sorry.
Yes, I'm coming to it.
Give examples of
Yes, here.
to be like this.
Here. Okay, so instead of saying that I'm looking at satisfaction and loyalty in Sudan, what you can say is the relationship between perceptions and share of wallet among Sudanese millennials in Sudan. Now what we are doing is pretty much same. Satisfaction is your perceptions towards certain things. So instead of saying satisfaction, you have to be specific on what you are looking at it. Loyalty is again a very general term. So you may want to look at a certain part of loyalty, which is share of wallet. Not many people have done this. So we have seen a lot of loyalty, but share of wallet, we don't see a lot, right? And then even you collect data from Sudan, it's okay. But look at millennials, that's an upcoming thing. So not much research is done on millennials, right? So that makes your study much more interesting now, instead of directly saying satisfaction and loyalty in Sudan, okay? For this one, your argument must be very strong. So what do we mean? So when you are making this, you need to talk about why perception and share of wallet is important. You need to say that, okay, when we talk about loyalty, people talk about intention to recommend, intention to revisit a lot, but we don't talk about share of wallet. There's research. And then you also need to say why you are doing on millennials. So you can say they are upcoming, they'll have more power to buy things and stuff like this. You have to justify. The second one, although it has been done before, but very few studies have looked at it, okay? For example, the impact of color of the food on perceptions of food taste. So some people have studied it, but not many people have studied it. So you just make it more interesting, okay? So what we have looked at is in the past is how perceptions of the food impact loyalty or something like this. So now you go beyond it, look at the color of the food or look at the texture of the food. It's the same thing, but just a little bit different. Right? So that's it's a good place to be, where you are not completely doing a new thing, you are not completely replicating something, you are in the middle somewhere. Okay? The third one is practitioners talk a lot about it, but we don't have studies and theory about it. Right? So this is where the magazines and the talk shows and those type of things come into the picture. For example, how many times we see interviewing etiquettes discussed by the industry? Like when you go for a job, people say you should behave well, this is the etiquette for interview and stuff like this, right? Industry always focus on this, but when we look at our literature, not many studies are done on this thing. So industry people talk about it, but scholars do not talk about it. Because for us, it's not very relevant thing. How many times we look at interviews, right? So it's not very relevant. So that is something you can do, and that's examining the impact of interviewing etiquettes on job search success. This is interesting, but the thing is you have to bring some literature background to it. As I said, it's more talked about in industry, but not in theory. So when you do your literature, you have to be very strong in the literature and see whatever is available, you bring it in, okay? Strategy number 4. You take a lot of variables from a lot of different studies and you combine them in one study, okay? As I said earlier, the impact of fun, thrill, engagement on customer satisfaction, loyalty, a case of adventure tourism. So what you are doing is you are mixing many models together. Is it a good strategy? Is it a bad strategy? It depends. In my opinion, it can be a hard sell. Why? Because many people will ask you, how do you justify these relationships? Because you are mixing different things, right? So that's something you need to consider. Number 5, it's done a lot, but you do it bigger and better. What do we mean by this? So this one, myself have written 10 papers on this topic. Physical and social environment on emotions and behavior. Grace is doing a PhD on it. Even after I write 10 papers on it. Okay? It's okay, you do it, but do a big one. Look at 3,000 people. 3 different data sets from hotels, from restaurants, from theme parks, different data sets, bring more comparisons, right? Find a person like Mustafa, ask him, find out the difficult statistical terms, use them, mediated binary logistic regression. Okay, make it better, bigger, so people, oh wow, this is so big, right? Even many people did it before, but if you do this, many reviewers are going to question the value. Okay, it's good, you did it big and all that, but what's the value? There is where you need to talk about the bigger data set, more generalizable results, the comparisons between different data sets, stuff like that. The last one is add a new theoretical spin. We all need to use theories, right, in our studies. Bring the theory in the title. Focus more on the theory. So you use SOR, you need to focus more on SOR. How do you contribute to the theory? Not the literature, but the theory. So for example, fun training and Kahn's model of psychological engagement. So that's a theory, Kahn's model of Now, this is also a good strategy, but you should remember that the reviewers might ask you, there are 20 theories, why did you choose this theory? Why not others? So you should be ready to justify that. Okay? The last one is do something controversial or irresistible. Do something that's very controversial. Don't do physically, don't do controversial things. Your research should be controversial. Okay. For example, a lot of things that a lot of people who use PLS now is a controversial thing because many people like it, many people don't like it. You know, I feel PLS is like durian. Some people love it, some people hate it. There's no middle place, right? Or cho tofu, sticky tofu. Some people love it, some people hate it. There's no middle, right? So either you love PLS, either you hate it. It's controversial. But an example is this: the impact of server attractiveness, ability, and personality on guest intention to pay the tips. So you want to look, if the girl looks beautiful, how much people will pay the tips? If that boy server on the bar looks beautiful, how much the girls are paying tips? It's a controversial topic, right? Many people might talk about ethics and all that stuff. But it's a good topic because not many people do controversial things, right? So it can be a good thing. The only thing is, what earlier somebody said, I think Mali Maduloglu, that if you are doing this topic, maybe it's only relevant for 5 years. After 5 years, nobody cares about it, right? Tattoos. A few years ago, people didn't like it, right? Now it's more and more acceptable in US. I don't know about other countries, but in US. So maybe 5 years ago, somebody studied tattoos. It was good, very good topic. Now people don't care. It's widely accepted, right? So these are some strategies that you can deal with, you can do in order to create a perfect pitch, to make people buy into your study, right? Remember that there are 3 types of contributions: theoretical contribution, where you are contributing to the theory; methodological contribution, where you are contributing more towards methodology; and contextual contribution is the least one, where you are doing a study in another context to see how the results are in another context. My idea is you have to mix these things. Don't focus on one. Don't focus on theoretical or methodological or contextual. You should focus on 2 or 3 of them. Remember that your introduction should be carefully crafted. When you are doing your introduction, make sure you do those things which I just mentioned. When you are playing safe, which means if you are doing something that has already been done, you are not going out of the way, people are going to question the novelty, like what's new in your study, right? If you go for novelty, they will question everything. Like if you do something completely new, people are going to question everything that you did. Why did you do this, right? So you should always look for unique elements, multiple unique elements in your study. It's very, very important. And in the last, this is my message to all of you. There are no shortcuts. Work very hard and patient and consistent and don't give up. And you will all be good, right? Thank you. Oh, one other thing, very quick, very quick. I remember that guy question as well. Impact factor we talked about, right? It's people look at it as quality. It's not really quality. But remember, impact factors are based on certain papers that attract a lot of citations, right? So let's say if I submit a paper to a top impact factor journal, and I'm very happy. I'm like, oh, I publish a paper in 5 impact factor. What's my contribution? Nothing, because impact factor is based on something that has been done before. So now many people are looking at other statistics like H-index and I-index and stuff like this. So I-index, H-index, these are all on Google Scholar. I-index is how many of your papers are cited more than 10 times. So every paper of you that's cited more than 10 times will become one I-index. So for example, my I-index is 24 right now, which means 24 of my papers are cited more than 10 times. That's one thing. And the H-index is how many publications you have and how many citations you have. So let's say if I have 15 papers, right? The first paper is cited 200 times, the second paper is cited 100, blah, blah, blah. The 6th paper is cited 6 times. The 7th paper is cited 2 times or 3 times, so my H index will be 6, where your rank of your publication become equal to the number of citation it gets. So my H index is 16 right now, which means 16 of my papers are cited 16 or more than 16 times. So the more H index, it means more and more people read more and more of your work, right? The more I index means more and more of your papers are cited more than 10 times. So it just shows that you are not only a good researcher for one paper, but for most of your papers. So that's something I want to clarify.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Ali. I will